Cool, guys. We have attendees coming in.
Awesome. Aru, if you can go to the next slide. Lovely. We'll wait a few seconds before we start. For all of these attendees that I see, if you could put your location, your company, and maybe your designation in Zoom chat, it'll give the panelists a sense of the kind of audience we have today. We have 25 people already. Somebody from Byju's. Hi, Vishal. The math company. 2 folks we have. Aru, I believe now should be a good time to start.
Yep, Tane. I think we can.
Awesome. Let's go to the next slide, please. I want to introduce everyone before we get started today. Great. Cool. So, folks, as you can see on our screen, we have 4 amazing individuals with us today. We do have Sonali from Uber. She heads the global survey program and handles employee insights. She is based in Mumbai, even though she tells me they've gone 100% remote now. And a little thing outside of work is she's a certified scuba diver. She loves skydiving. And she likes to spend most of her time outdoors, even though we've gone remote now. So that's Sonali for you, everybody. And after Sonali, I'd love to introduce you to Amrit now. Amrit is currently working at Digit Insurance. She's the head HR. Digit Insurance recently became a unicorn. And in addition to that, something very interesting about her, even though she's based in Delhi, is that she used to run a home decor company called Gharonda, if I'm not mistaken, Amrit. And she can spend hours and hours just discussing interior design. And that's something that I really liked. But moving on to Jolvin, Jolvin is not just the global HR head at LearningMate, but interestingly, he's also the co-founder of LearningMate. And they have 1,200 employees. They're based in Mumbai. He was discussing his passion for kombucha, which is a probiotic tea, and we got a lengthy explanation on how he makes it. So in case any of you are interested in that, please do hit him up. And finally, we have Vasu, who is at Xceedance, and she's the senior VP HR over there. She's based in Gurgaon, where we guys are also based. She's equally passionate about meditation and mental health as much as I am. So that's the panel. And if you can go back to the previous slide. Quick clarification, Uber is not 100% remote. Sonali is 100% remote. So that's that. But the topic today is how do we excite employees in this remote workforce era, right? Because we've gone through this culture shock in 2020. I personally have been looking for answers for the last 1 year on how to motivate employees when you can't see them. Right. And we have a lot of questions for all 4 panelists, and we're all going to try to be as vulnerable, as real, as authentic as possible. So if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to put them on Zoom chat. If you're shy, you can DM them to me on Zoom chat and I'll ask it on your behalf. So I've got your back. So with that, I wanted to start this session with Amrit, right? So Amrit, if you could sort of explain that at Digit Insurance, how do you motivate employees, right? That's the question I have. Like in general, how do you motivate these employees, especially in a journey where you've now become a unicorn, right? And motivating them at scale would be ridiculously difficult, I presume.
Yes. So if I talk about the last 1 year, Tanmay, as an insurance industry, we've grown by 3%, but Digit grew by 35% in the last 1 year. So we practically moved 1,800 employees to work from home overnight. So when I think live brainstorming sessions stopped, when peer-to-peer motivation went missing, and when people realized that working from home in a large family was not that amazing anymore, the onus was on the leadership team and the HR team to ensure that business as usual carried on. So one of the biggest workforce initiatives which we took was in the first few months was reaching out to every individual employee one-on-one. So every HR team member called 5 people every day, and we kept calling till we reached about 1,500 employees in just 2 months. So I think, and now as we continue to do that, Amber is helping us reach out. So just making the employee voice heard, guiding and reassuring them of our commitment really, really helped in our journey. And I think the second team is that the thing is that the leadership team has constantly, with the help of CXO Connects, Chairman Calling or Friday Connects or virtual happy hours, have constantly been answering the why and making everyone part of the why. We used to have a Digit Pulse newsletter, which was published every month. And in the last 1 year, we came out with something which was called as the Lockdown Edition, where we started featuring offices across the country of how they were managing. When news was gloomy, we started something which was called as the Good News Edition, in which we started sharing one good news every day. And it was incredible the kind of response we got from across the country. I think besides that, most organization, they capture NPS of external stakeholders. We took the initiative of starting an activity of capturing NPS for internal stakeholders. How are departments within Digit working with each other when it comes to, efficiency, empathy, being solution oriented? So another new initiative which we've started is a culture training module. So, while virtual onboarding has been happening, earlier everyone used to come down to Bangalore for what we called as the huddle day. Now, through virtual onboarding, we've started, a module called culture training module, where we define with the help of stories and examples, what does it really mean to be a digital? So it means being transparent. It means questioning the status quo. It means breaking the stereotypical mold in which the insurance industry is operated by earlier. So I think all these initiatives brought together in the last 1 month, we've tried to create an environment of optimism for the whole organization as such.
Amrit, that's fairly interesting, right? Because the first question I had in mind is you said 1,500 phone calls, right? So,
Yes.
how did you humanly do that one? And what kind of questions and agenda did you have in those calls, right? Like, what was the approach you took?
So these were only personal questions. They were not business questions of how are people managing, what are the things they required from the organization, did they have the digital capabilities to stay connected with the organization or not? And were there team leaders and managers reaching out to them? So these were personal questions to make sure that everybody was on the same page. And of course, I also mentioned that every HR team members, it was a mandate given, has to make 5 phone calls every single day. And that's how we managed reaching out to them. For us, the most important I think tool in Digit and in HR is these one-on-one connects, which we are doing.
Got it. Understood. And you also mentioned that you're involving your workforce in the why at a leadership level, right? If you can just explain that a little more, that is it just sort of reharping the mission, vision, etc., or is it a little more than that? I'm just curious what you meant by that.
So, it is a mandate for everybody to have virtual happy hours. We started initiating this Friday Connects and virtual happy hours for every team. And anything which I think gets started from the leadership position just filters down. So the biggest initiative is taken by our chairman himself, who, despite being based in Munich, during the entire lockdown, every fortnight we would do a one-digit call with all 1,800 employees on the call, addressing needs, encouraging them to WhatsApp, email queries, ask questions. So when the leadership team themselves are getting involved on a weekly and a quarterly basis, it makes a huge difference to the morale of the team.
Got it. So it's interesting how I hear you actually mandated a few little things that matter, right? Whether it's 5 calls a day or moving to ENPS from NPS, and something as important as virtual happy hours. It's fairly interesting. But anything you did at the onboarding level as well, because I can imagine being a unicorn, you would be hiring aggressively. So how do you really engage the workforces who've never even seen your office?
So, we've done a couple of changes. Of course, besides automating the entire onboarding process, we've recently moved to an ATS. There are a couple of things we've introduced. So, with virtual onboarding, I spoke about the culture training module. We've also gamified a lot of our heavy insurance modules. So nobody wants to go through a 60-slide fire insurance policy module. So that is something which we've done. And most insurance companies give an induction kit where you'll have your T-shirt, your bottle or a pen or this thing. In Digit, we offer something called as the Insure Race. It's like a game which has been created about Digit's policies and processes, and it's like your business or Monopoly. It's a game which we've specifically created for Digit, which goes as a part of the induction kit. And when people receive it, it's really, really exciting the kind of feedback you get. To be able to play something which is about your own company. Besides that, we've initiated something called Digit Wire. It is basically minus 30 days. We start sharing snippets about the company, a little bit of information about your team to get them excited about what awaits them before they join us.
Got it. I think I really liked the way you've gamified your onboarding. Like it literally feels like a game. So I will definitely ping you offline. Maybe we'll do a blog for everyone to see the kind of
Absolutely.
stuff you're doing.
We'll send you the game, the Insure Race game, which is a game about Digit.
Okay, all right. So I think the final question for you, Amrit, is something I see on chat, which is someone's asking, and they choose to be anonymous here. What's the best way to retain top talent when you're blitzscaling to a unicorn status? So anything you're doing for retention in specific?
So I can give you an example of a challenge which we faced in our customer happiness team. Our attrition ratio went up to 40-45%. So it was literally like a bucket with a hole in it. We were hiring people and losing people. So we've started small initiatives, which is started a program called Accelerate, in which call center employees get the opportunities to move into other departments and through internal job transfers. And somebody wants to be in underwriting, in operations, in HR. So we have a lot of internal job transfers happening within Digit, which really helps in retaining employees. I think besides that, we have a very strong succession planning and upskilling opportunities, lots of upskilling opportunities within Digit. So I think all these put together, and of course, in Digit, we believe in skin in the game. So we are the only insurance company to also allow ownership and stock options. Stock options, of course, is being done by a couple of companies, but offering equity ownership is something which really helps in retaining the senior talent in the company.
Got it. No, thank you so much, Amrit. We'll circle back because I had a few questions for Vasu now. So Vasu, at Xceedance, right? In particular, how do you build trust in the workforce as you scale and build your team? So this is an area I want to dabble with you on. And if you could share your thoughts, then we can do a Q&A after that.
Sure. So I have, about 24 years of work experience, and all of it was working from an office. So suddenly last year when I started working from home, and Tanmay, something like you mentioned, I always believed that work from home may not work out so much in India. But how things change. When I initially started working from home, I felt I needed to be this over responsive person. As soon as a mail would come in, I had to reply to it. I had to keep my team's light always on green, almost to prove to everyone that I was working and I wasn't on an extended holiday and a weekend. But this can be incredibly distracting because you drop everything, you see a mail pop up and you drop everything and start replying to it. And then I realized, if it is me who's feeling this so much, what is happening to the other team members? So I went back, we just had a discussion, and we went back and set expectations with everybody that work on your own time, you have the flexibility, because we've always been an outcome based we've always had an outcome based approach in terms of results. And I think this went a long way to forge trust in people, just handing them the flexibility and autonomy to work at their hours when they are comfortable. because they know the best. They know what they need to do. Just give them the accountability and let them own the results. And I think that has proved an absolute success story for us. Last year, we've onboarded almost 685 new people. And we closed our year without resetting any targets. We closed at over 100% achievement. So I think that was a phenomenal job done by each and every person without coming to office. And trust me, we were totally in 100% work environment in office. So it was a sea change, but everybody came up to it very well. And that's why my first point is that trust is a two-way street. We have to trust each other to know that whatever we are doing, it is to make the company go forward. And to that, I also want to add that every person needs to be aligned, therefore, to the purpose of the organization and how they are fitting into it. So like what Amrit was saying, to every new hire, we make sure that they understand that. And then the third point, I guess, which was very important, was that when we were in office, we would gravitate towards the coffee breaks and talk about stories and, things outside of work. So we had to make sure that we knew what people are thinking and provide not only the psychological safety, because we went in taking, employee assistant programs and all of that, but the social connections. And we started what became like a weekly ritual for us, where we had time out just for teams to know each other and not only keep giving them business updates, but also about how we are doing as a company and know about each other beyond business updates. So just fun, enjoy, like Amrit said, happy hours. We have our own days. We have a downtime day when nobody works and teams just connect with families and, have a lot of fun and games and, the works. So many ways that we are looking at making sure the social connection is up, office or no office, things don't change. That's it.
Vasu, I like how you mentioned the fact that, we ourselves as leaders have gone through maybe, if not the same, a similar challenge that our team members and our entire workforce is going through. In fact, very recently, like post lockdown, I found out that 72% of leaders and entrepreneurs themselves struggle with their mental well-being after going remote, right? So if leaders themselves are facing the same problem as their team members, it's sort of like a catch-22, that who do you solve for first? So I do have a specific question in regard to that a lot of us do know that the answer to trust is to actually give flexibility, autonomy, and so on. But there is a big chunk of people who are struggling with it despite knowing this. So why do you think there are managers or function heads or leaders who struggle with this trust in remote work? And what can they do about it?
It's an interesting question because I went through this struggle myself. And I think it just comes by a cultural mindset that we want to, which we need to change. For very long, what we could see is what we believe was actually happening. And I think we need to realize that this kind of environment is here to stay. And we will have teams that are virtual and from anywhere. And it's all about, just working on the mindset to start giving and delegating accountability and entrusting that the decisions that individuals and teams are making are for the good of the organization and professionally good for themselves. Everybody owns their own career. I think the day we start believing that we are all accountable for our own careers and every person in our team also believes that, I think it'll be sorted.
Interesting. So I do have two follow-on questions, and then we can move on. The first one is, do you have any mechanism to identify, because at scale, you will have like a certain set of individuals who may not be using the trust in the way you imagine, right? It may be 0.1%, but do you have any mechanism to identify which audience is actually leveraging the trust in the right way and which audience is not?
Yeah, so we have, like I shared, we have a very outcome-based approach. And for most of our people, we have monthly scorecards. And that is a very objective way of knowing who's doing what. And I don't even have to go and tell them, how they did. It is there right in front of them. They are incorporating the data. And because it's system driven, it is very clear, if what are the defects that have happened, what was the quality, what was the turnaround time to complete work. So everything is quite digitized and automated. So I think technology there is a great blessing.
Got it. Understood. And Vasu, I think what I really want to congratulate you on is that your goals did not change despite COVID and you went ahead and met them, right? I think that in itself would be a motivating factor for a lot of your team members. But that said, right, we're living in a time where, yes, sometimes the workforce is entitled and we have like, humongous expectations from employees despite the level of growth you have. So on those lines, if you could share that despite this growth, right, like if there were cases of demotivation in pockets and so on, like what was your answer to motivating employees? The same way Amrit shared some ideas with us.
So one, like I shared, these weekly rituals of time out was a very important I mean, of course, increments we gave more than what the market was offering, because we did well. We gave it last year as well as this year. We had no changes in that, so that of course worked well. But aside from that, I think we created a work environment where everybody had a feeling of empowerment, and that was clearly by sharing with people and with very direct communication. So if there were people who were not feeling as connected, we have created very open communication channels where they can directly come and speak to anybody in the organization, from the CEO to the team manager to anybody. There is no hierarchy as such in terms of communication. And I think that really helped, because people knew that if they speak, their voice is going to be heard. We have regular pulse check-ins with people on how they are doing. And I can tell you, even from a remote working, a lot has changed. Initially, people thought this was temporary. So the feedback we used to get in our check-ins was different. And now we are only hearing about the fact that some want to come back to office, and we've extended it till June end. And some say they're so happy working from home. And almost, I think 70% of our people are saying they want both. So, these things happen. People are changing, their thoughts are evolving, and we have to keep up with the pulse of people. And I think that works well.
Got it. In fact, Vasu, this reminds me, one of the mistakes I noticed some of the companies in India were doing was they weren't decisive about whether they want to go remote or whether they want to stay in the office, because certain companies were actually confused about it, and therefore they didn't build the right systems for remote and neither the systems for hybrid. So I think that's worst case scenario, but I think you do have an edge over all of us because your growth trajectory has been phenomenal. So congratulations. But with that, I think I'd love to segue into Jolvin's story, because Jolvin in particular, I am excited about your perspective, because you're not just like the global HR head, you're also the co-founder. So you will actually have the CXO and the HR perspective joined as one. So, and we did speak about expectations and a certain sense of entitlement with Vasu right now. So what would be your take on managing employee expectations, right? Especially as a leadership team member, not just as an HR person.
Thanks, Tanmay. I think one of the key things that we started to realize very quickly, and we, I mean, like you mentioned at the start, right? Being very conservative about this whole work from home business. We believe that being a content and technology solutions company, for us to have remote workforces was like a strict no-no. And yet, I guess just probably 3 days before lockdown was announced, we said we are sending everybody home. And we pretty much packed everyone and sent them home, not knowing whether they'll be coming back tomorrow or a week later, or we're nearly a year now. And I'm happy to say that I think that decision has worked for us in that sense. I guess it's more about the realization that suddenly this world has new options, right? And these options are everywhere, right from giving people the option to work at any time, anywhere, uh, options for employers like us to find people anywhere, because otherwise we would be, uh, zoning in largely in areas that we believed were our office spaces, because obviously we had invested a lot in infrastructure and made our offices look nice and pretty, to ensure that whenever somebody came into our office, they didn't feel like leaving, as well, including folks who we used to call in for recruitment. So I think that realization to kind of say that, okay, yes, everybody has options, and how do we enable that, was where a large part of our decision making was set in. So we kept meeting pretty much every week rather, a core team of management was leading the operations and decided what was best for us to move forward, and how do we kind of clear the furniture out of the way, right? I think that's our job. I mean, at the end of the day, as a management team, all said and done, I guess that's what we do, to ensure that our people have the ability to kind of deliver to what we've, they are meant to, and ensure that there is no unnecessary bureaucracy in things that is needed. So whether, we moved everybody from desktops to laptops, or we moved people and gave them, as something as simple and thing like, internet reimbursement, because a lot of people, at that point start to feel that that's another burden that they have in their lives, right? The ability for them to have good net connection to be able to deliver well. And I'm happy to say that I have yet, and knock on wood, I've yet to hear any productivity issue that has happened, which kind of gets me to the next point. How do we kind of keep them, excited, right, beyond work? There's a lot of work that everybody's doing, but there is a lot of other initiatives that we thought uh, uh, were needed, especially with this change, because that change brought in a requirement for things that we took for granted. Right, we are a much smaller organization in that sense. I mean, I don't think 1,200 is a big number. It's easily accessible. You pretty much know a lot of them very easily. But we had another issue. We had uh, close to 300, 400 people that we added during the lockdown. So we have no clue how they look, what are their expectations in that sense when they've come in. But I guess the only way that and a lot of the other, Amrit and Vasu have already mentioned that regular connect with folks, management meetings, team meetings that allowed them to kind of get to know their team members, and we had some of those processes in place at the start. But I think one of the other aspects that we realized that was going to be useful and would not cost us anything was this whole concept of shining examples. Because we had just released a new version of our values, which was kind of settling in, and we thought that that's one of the easiest ways for us to basically say that, we value that you've come and joined us in this time. Whether you had a job before this, because of COVID, some of them lost their jobs, whether you had a job there, whether you were transitioning because you felt that this was a good time for you to come into, uh, let's say, edtech for that matter. And I think that in some ways also spread across the organization, because it just gave people who came in that there is an organization that probably cares for you. uh, we obviously had the advantage of having work, because the edtech space suddenly saw a surge in activity. um, I mean, whatever the reason, right? I mean, whether everybody was working from home, kids were studying from home, pretty much every other country, everybody was online, which augurs well for organizations like us who then have the additional good problem of having to scale up. So convincing people that they would be part of a new journey and a exciting journey was, half the battle was won there. uh, I guess last, but probably not the least, is in this environment where we felt that, the trust deficit would be very high, right? Because in places where you haven't met somebody, they have not met you. Phone conversations eh, or Zoom conversations are at best, serve only that much. The real connect happens when you have met somebody across the table. You look them in the eye and said, come join us. And I guess the only way to kind of say that that trust needs to be continued was to do right by what we felt our employees were doing. So if we felt that the employee said something like this, we trusted that approach. I think that was the only way we believed that we could kind of further this, because we hadn't seen this kind of growth in the past few years. I mean, we were moving towards that, but this growth was unprecedented for us, and continues to be the same. We will eventually probably go with a hybrid approach, because that's what the feedback that we're getting from our people is that they would be happy to kind of look at both options. Either work from home, or come in to office.
So,
And
Jolvin, could you maybe give a specific scenario of the hybrid approach, right? Because people interpret it differently. So, what would you mean by hybrid in your case?
So one thing that we did, I think I kind of mentioned that we hired from anywhere, right? So we decided that, okay, we're not going to hire from, two dev centers that we have, which is Mumbai and Kolkata. We can hire, now we have folks from Delhi, we have folks from Gurgaon, we have folks from Chennai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, pretty much everywhere. And the likelihood of them coming back into our office is pretty much, not something that we are going to push for, because there's a proven thing that we would have people being able to kind of manage their work from there. When we say hybrid, it would mean that and we would do that consciously, is not increase infrastructure, so that it forces us to keep that approach alive. Because the compulsion that happens when management increases infrastructure is, oh, we need people to come and sit in our infrastructure, right? That, I mean, I know why that smile is. So I think that is one way to kind of force the organization to work that model. Because if unless you had a lockdown, I think 50% of us would never believe in this, that people were capable of being accountable to the work that they were given. I think that's where the trust factor comes in, and I think we would believe that that would work, because for us to scale, and with the talent demand that is out there, we would have to kind of do this pretty much from any location. I'm just talking India right now. I'm saying it could be from anywhere, and we should be able to kind of build those systems and processes, which is what we are being fast tracking now. Whether it is around training, around values, around engagement models that go beyond the typical standard ones. A lot of automation, a lot of systems that need to come in, because this, I mean, you cannot just infinitely scale your HR workforce to manage this. It has to be done in a systemic manner, and then have the people touch with that.
All right. No, Jolvin, I particularly like how you've been very decisive about the hybrid workforce. And I was actually reminded of something where in the early days of me interacting with HR folks, I learned that HR, if they come from a different background, so let's say a finance person turned HR or a tech person turned HR, I've seen a lot of innovation. So a leadership team member entering HR, I can see that reflect in some of the actions you've taken. But thanks for your perspective. Coming to you now, Sonali, and lots of excitement around Uber because it's a brand we're all well aware of. In particular, something some of the folks here would not know is that Sonali was running the global survey program, which is why I do have some questions around this sentiment. Where Sonali, I noticed on LinkedIn you've mentioned you reduced the survey implementation time by 50%, and you improved the manager adoption by 8x, in addition to a few other softer aspects. So can you just touch upon how do you really stay on top of the employee sentiment?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to answer that. And, this is just a disclaimer true to my passion and profession. A lot of my responses will be from an analytics lens. So if you need to pull me back to give a more broader response, happy to do that. How do you stay on top of employee sentiment, right? I think that's every HR person's sort of holy grail. it's a lot easier to do in a stable environment, because external factors and internal factors are a lot more stable. Sentiment themes don't change very much, even though sentiment might change per se. So the structure of your employee engagement program can remain largely sort of rigid or constant. When things are moving around with the pace they are now, this is Uber. We're in, at last count, we're in 10,000 plus cities, right? Now, COVID has exposed each of those cities to completely different macroeconomic environments. So the complexity of what Uber, of course, as a company, but also our employees, 15,000 plus employees, are experiencing is just sort of at a completely new level because of the pandemic. So one of the things that I personally believe in is just that there is no workaround or no second best to continuous listening. Eventually, you've got to, especially now, you've got to kind of tap into that dynamic, what the workforce is saying, and really kind of listen in a bit more sort of dynamic way. So what we've done differently is. We've kind of actually introduced concepts that didn't exist before, not in a standard engagement practice. We've introduced concepts around well-being, right? And as to how is our workforce doing. But that's not enough, right? You also need to know there's very little understood around well-being as a concept. So we also kind of deep dived into what are some of those drivers of well-being. From an analytics perspective, what are the challenges now when you talk about low well-being or high well-being? What are some of those challenges that people are facing specifically? How do you identify groups or segments or personas that are actually struggling? For those struggling populations, right, what are their specific requirements? How can they be supported? What are their unique needs? So the moment you kind of start to look at that and ask yourself all these questions, suddenly it makes the whole conversation of decision making around response just a lot more elevated and a lot more informed, which is kind of my personal mission, just to be able to make informed decisions as much as we can about as many things as we can as they relate to our people.
Got it. So Sonali, Jolvin mentioned that we can't keep scaling our HR workforce as our problems increase. So if you can just describe the maybe org chart of your people analytics team, and how do you really enforce a culture of data-driven decision making?
So Tanmay, the one thing that you should know about it, Uber, is that it's honestly the most dynamic organization I've worked for. So I could give you an org structure right now, and will it be relevant tomorrow? I don't know. So there's that. I think it's important to sort of constantly be dynamic and respond to change in that way. And we've done that as well. Even with the way we're organized, we've responded and being flexible with the teams that are organized within HR, within people analytics, the function that I'm part of. And what we change are our priorities. So when we kind of I believe if the why you're working on is clear to you, I think the how needs to be kind of arranged. That's just been my philosophy. So the people priorities have changed, right? And continuous listening, for example, is a big priority for us. So we kind of organize ourselves to drive towards that. The to your point around scaling HR indefinitely, of course, that's that's a great point, and it's an understood point. So I am a huge fan of productization. And productization is actually going to come in, and it's not just coming to HR, right? It's coming to every other function, and it's touching every other function. It's just the impact in HR is just so much higher, just because the personal lives that we're able to touch, because of the scale that productization brings, because of the personalization that productization brings. No matter how much you scale your workforce, right? There's a cap that you're going to reach with regards to how relevant your intervention or your solutions can be to every employee. So where as a I would say my priority, and then the way we're thinking about it, the way I think about my role is really now around productization driven by scale and personalization.
That's very interesting, Sonali. So a couple of things you reminded me of. One was that in our early days, we learned that mostly people say there's a problem of survey fatigue, but the actual problem is lack of action fatigue. So a question I have for you is, yes, you did implement a really effective survey of sorts across Uber, but are there any key actions you learned in the last 1 year which sort of moved the needle for you at Uber?
That's a great point, and I love, action taking is there's an energy around action taking, right? It's embedded into the culture, uh, but knowing where to take action, that's where I come in, right? That's where I specialize, which is, we work with our HR partners, and they do an incredible job with building the resources around action planning, building a culture of action taking, making sure, as I think Vasu said, just ensuring that action taking around sentiment is owned all across the organization. So I firmly believe, and we've kind of brought this into our products as well, is employees own action on their sentiment as much as managers do, as much as leaders do. And I see my role as a people analytics professional in enabling them to take that action by providing to them the tools that they need. So that's sort of step one, which is, do you know who needs to take action, and are you giving them what they need to be able to take action? So once you kind of build that culture, then specifically you kind of bring in tools. Like I said, where you need to take action is kind of becomes more critical. That's where some of our analysis around predictive math, trying to figure out what will move the needle, right? So do we need to move the needle on anything that's low scoring, anything where the sentiment is low? Do we target that, which is where the sentiment is the lowest, or really do we target our action on areas that are truly going to have the maximum impact on our employees' well-being, productivity, and sentiment? So those are some of the things that we've learned over the past, and we've corroborated that with external research. So that's been exciting to kind of really focus the organization's action-taking capability, in addition to increasing the continuity of it, like you said, Tanmay.
Got it. So, Sonali, a question I had is, it reminded me of what Amrit said in the beginning of this call, where they did start implementing ENPS as an internal metric. Now, to really have employees across Uber own the action on this sentiment, have you added ENPS to their KPIs, or how do you make sure that this happens at scale, right? Where they actually own the actions as much as you do in the HR function?
That's a great point. I know it comes up a lot, kind of talking about how do we mandate this, so to speak, or build it into people's sort of KPIs. I can give you my personal view on this, right? This year is not the year to mandate anything on anyone. There's enough going on, and people have a lot going on. So that's not my preferred, goal as well. I'm a big fan of, Taylor and the nudge theory and behavioral economics. So I do believe that people should be provided with nudges, and there's kind of ways to do that, and giving them, the right set of choices, the right set of reminders, and kind of letting that decide, action taking and outcome. Versus mandating. So my personal view is not to kind of build it into KPIs, but definitely there needs to be more accountability, and around what managers can see, what they act on. So we're constantly experimenting with ways to make that happen, which is why those metrics you described that we were able to achieve was because of seeing what works, what will move the needle, what kind of comms works, who do we need to target, and what is the group that will kind of help move the needle. But personally, I'm not a fan of mandates in that way.
Understood. All right. So I'm being pinged constantly that we have 2 minutes because we have to have 15 for Q&A. So Sonali, my final question to you is around the productization aspect. I personally do believe that if you look at the HR function like a product function, where you're approaching it in that way, and you've taken it one step forward by actually productizing as many things as possible. Are there any examples of things you've productized in the HR function at scale?
So I would say it's so my this might sound like an indirect answer, but I truly believe this, and this is what we are propagating is, productization is a mindset. It's not an actual product, right? We've had HRIS systems for a while. We've had employee engagement, vendors around for a while. We all use benefits and we're also, while we all have products, the moment you kind of start to think of even a program or an initiative, the moment you start to think of productization of HR, suddenly everything is an opportunity. And so we started measuring everything in terms of, adoption, how many people are being reached, is this moving the needle, who the users are, and kind of thinking like product managers. And that's just changed the game, because honestly, everything now is up for productization per se. So while we still have, we're productized in the traditional sense of the word, but we call ourselves, I'm for example, a product owner now of our continuous listening program. So I would say there's been a productization in the mindset.
Got it. I have a ton of follow-on questions, and I noticed Ashish Pinto over here on chat has asked the same question, but we'll circle back in Q&A. I just thought we'll take like a 10-second break, and there was a short poll we guys were curious about. So if you could quickly run that poll, and meanwhile, the panelists, I request you to go through the questions in Q&A so we can mentally prep ourselves. We can take about a minute. That's all right. All right. I love the birds in Sonali's background. It's just, I didn't want to stop and break the silence, but we have to do what we have to do. By the way, the questions on chat, even though I've noticed they're addressed to some of the panelists, it's just a result of them speaking at that point in time. So if any of one of you four would like to answer these, please feel free to go ahead. So I think the first one from Bharti here is, what is a common mistake with regards to like trying employee motivation or overdoing it that you guys would have faced or you should share with everyone else over here? And Vasu, maybe you can go with this one.
So I think for 2021, I think the question was about 2021. I mean, this is my suggestion to all of us in the HR world, is to make sure that we design and architect experiences for our employees so that no one is compelled to come to office because they think that they're going to miss anything. Hybrid working is here to stay, whether it's 100% remote or some days coming to office, some days working from home. But nobody should feel compelled that they will not get leader face time or they'll miss some sort of, career growth or things like that. We have to, I mean, it's a new playing field for us and we have to set new rules. That's my response.
Got it. Would anyone else like to add?
I think you need to give people the flexibility to decide whether they want to work from home. So in Digit, we did this one mistake in the month of August of September, where we said that, okay, now it's time to get back to office. And we said that 50% of the people should start coming back. But we saw a huge friction when we announced that. And then, of course, we decided and gave HODs the flexibility to run their departments on their own. So I think one mistake is to decide one shoe fits all. So employees, whatever policies you make in your organization need to be really, really flexible.
Got it. In fact, Amrit, you reminded me of this thing I learned a few months back where, as we scale companies, right? And as we scale culture in 2021, the importance of tracking individual ambitions, individual problems, desires, and how they keep changing month on month in the times that we are in is even more critical. And that ties back to how Sonali mentioned that productization helps personalization. So definitely a great point, but that is again the next question, Sonali, by Ashish Pinto, that he is still asking for at least one example, because yes, we are aware of the product manager mindset thanks to you, but is there any one example you could share? I hope we're not harping too much on this.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a good question. And I'll be completely honest, right? It's a journey that we're on now. It's not something that we've done for a while and that we've established our resources around it. It's something we're starting now. I can talk about, the product that I own, which is continuous listening. and I'm calling it a product now. I've never called, in HR, I haven't called anything as as a product that I've owned. So there's that cultural shift that has happened. Now, as I own this product, right, what we're trying to do is, one is you think like a product manager, which is, who are your users? What are you trying to do with it? What is the objective? How will this get you there? You listen to your users. Clay also asked a question around, if you don't have a culture of continuous listening, how do you go about building it? You ask people what they want, why they want it, and then you build for that. You build a product. When you go around executing on a program, we don't ask people, do you want to be heard? Which questions do you want? Do you want employee engagement once a year or twice a year? No company's asked me that. I've been working for 12 years, right? So those are the fundamentals. Around the moment you start thinking of HR as a product, even employee listening as a product, suddenly it becomes collaborative and you're building something, you're co-building something with your users. So that's sort of this exciting space to be in, where you're not just pushing a program out or executing on a set of initiatives or completing a project or delivering on timelines. You're building something and improving on it and continuing to improve on it using best practices. I hope that answers your question.
Definitely, Sonali. I have taken some notes for myself as well. Thank you. I think for Vasu, there's another question on how do you really create a conducive homework environment. So if you could touch upon the things that you've kept in mind for remote work, that'll be very helpful.
I think one thing which we did very early on, we realized. I mean, I will not touch upon the money that we gave to people to get support to set their organization work home office kind of a setup, but more giving psychological safety to people. We very early on tied up with a company for employee assistant program, which had the ability to also provide, besides the doctors and medical doctors, psychologists and psychiatrists and counselors, to help people talk about any issues that they were facing, because a lot of them were not related to the professional world but also to the personal side of things, because there were 4 people in a small flat, everybody was working from home. So that was one thing which we did. The second thing which we worked on was a lot of communication, and I'd seen another linked question, that communication should not become intrusive. So we had days when there would be no communication. In fact, not done it yet, but we are planning to float the idea of a no meeting day, and probably a no communication day also, where people just have time to work or sit back and reflect on how to do work. Because I think all of us would have faced you just rush from one meeting to the other. So let's see how the no meeting day works out. So that was second. Then on the health and wellness side, we tied up with an organization, because it was for the internal team, it wasn't very possible to continuously have sessions on whether it was Zumba, whether it was yoga, whether it was meditation, whether it was just a talk on health and what should be the diet plan. So we partnered with a company who did it on regular basis, and we obviously titled it as Wellness Wednesdays. And the third thing which I think worked very well for us was also the communication around the purpose of the company. A lot of business updates are given, but I think the focused communication on how we were doing with the vision we had set for ourselves, what is our purpose, and it was from the CEO to the analyst, everybody became aligned to the purpose of Xceedance. And I think that's what makes Xceedance a very special place to work. Those were a couple of points. Yeah.
Thanks, Vasu. In fact, you reminded me of something I read through last week. These days, there are companies that have introduced job insurance programs where in the event, let's say people get laid off at scale or in any scenario, they do cover up for 6 to 12 months of pay in some portion or the other, which
Yeah.
could further add to the psychological safety. Even though the element of uncertainty may not be likely, it really adds the psychological aspect of safety around it. So I think that's something I thought I'll mention for everyone. But a question not just for you, Vasu, but for everyone in this panel, right? Because I think, Amrit, you mentioned 1,500 calls, right? So now you're collecting so much data. And this question is directed to all of you. How do you avoid information overload? Like that is a real problem. And that's a problem even I face at a scale of 70 people. So at a scale of 1,500, 2,000, 10,000 cities. So question for all four of you.
I think every information which is coming in should be taken, everything to avoid it. I think everything does not need to be passed on a major agenda in. What people require is you to just listen to them. So when we have feedback from 20 different corners coming in, our job as an HR team is to just listen and filter out what data we have to and what feedback do we have to actually work on, and what is something which is being shared, just to offload the emotions. So you have to differentiate between what is just an emotional outburst feedback coming from an employee and which is something which is actually constructive and we need to work on. So if you can differentiate the two, I don't feel that you'll ever feel the load of, an information overload.
Got it.
Tanmay, I just want to add one short point here, that I think we all need to become like techno-human resource people or techno-humans. Technology needs to help us sort and, like Sonali said, analyze the data, and we need to focus on actioning it. I think if we sort of divide the workload, we do well with it.
Got it. Understood.
Just wanted to add the whole aspect of information overload. I think that has existed even before lockdown came in, because with the advent of this whole digital revolution and the ability for everyone to create content, and I know I'm speaking from a content background perspective, but there is so much content anyways out there, and I guess a lot of us have now become used to choosing what we want to see, and I guess, even if there is, all I'm saying is there should not be less information out there, because I think a lot of my co-speakers alluded to it. Communicating about what is happening in the organization is very critical. So any information around that should not be looked upon as an information overload, but really information to have, because somebody may not consume it at that time when it is said, but once the word goes out, it becomes a topic of conversation, and that is also helpful, because we cannot avoid word of mouth, and that's also information. So information will come in from various sources. It all depends on us as individuals, how we want to consume it. So that's how I would look at it.
I actually share Jolvin's viewpoint. I was going to say I probably have a counter view, because I feel like I never feel like I have enough information or data. I feel like there's so much out there, and there's so much that influences an employee's sense of well-being, or that influences culture, and the amount of data, that's information that's being produced, we just can never have enough. And I just want some ability to be able to organize it in a way that is useful. I think that's sort of the next challenge. But information is everywhere, and it'll keep coming, like Jolvin said, and we can decide what to do with it, but we need to keep the taps open for sure.
Got it. In spirit of information overload, I thought I will just quickly articulate some of my takeaways in this call for everyone. I was frantically taking notes while you guys were speaking. So I just rattled them out in no sequence whatsoever. So I think the first one I learned was that, and it was phenomenal, by the way, 1,500 calls. The mandate here was for certain leadership team members and managers to make 5 calls a day, 1. 2, virtual happy hours on a weekly basis or a fortnightly basis at a leadership level was the second mandate. 3, moving from NPS just from customers to employees. That's another takeaway for most of us. 4, actually gamifying your onboarding like a game. I think that's where I would love to receive that game offline. And in case anybody wants it, you can connect with Amrit directly. 5, there's monthly scorecards, which helps keep the trust element in check with regards to the excess autonomy you're giving to your team members. 6, direct communication, especially on the autonomy, the vision, the purpose, is something we are well aware of, but executing it on a regular basis in your fortnightly or weekly all hands is helpful. I've lost count, but let's say it's number 7. I really liked how we're very decisive with Jolvin about making sure that we're clear whether it's hybrid, remote, or the office, and keeping in mind that since we can't infinitely scale the HR, we set the processes upfront, in addition to the desktops and laptops and basics that you set in place. Number 8, with Sonali, right? Productization, especially, is a very good point. But to really break it down with examples, have the HR team behave like product managers. They interview the employees like they interview customers. They ask questions which a product manager usually asks. For example, would you like to have a survey once a year or twice a year, and so on? Essentially having an element of co-building something very similar to how a PM does it. So that was number 8. Number 9 was where to take action is more critical than what the action is. So that was an interesting takeaway I had, and how you can really apply the nudge theory instead of KPIs to really drive accountability with managers. So that was number 9. Number 10 was employee assistance programs. That's something that has genuinely helped post-COVID. Number 11 is designing and architecting the experience in 2021 so that nobody is compelled to work out of an office out of FOMO, right? So that was number 11. And just to give it a sweet dozen and conclude with 12, I think the 12th one is really just making sure that we're differentiating between feedback that is an outburst or somebody venting vis-a-vis feedback that is real and needs immediate action. So these are 12 takeaways I just quickly wrote down. We will write a blog on this separately for those of you who missed it. But thank you so much, everyone, for taking out time. In case you have any questions for the panelists or me, you can channelize your questions to me. I will make sure they're answered on your behalf by the end of next week. Thanks, everyone, and have a great Friday ahead of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Vasu and Jolin and Sonali. Thank you.
Thank you, Amrit. Thank you, Vasu. Thank you, Sonali.
Thanks, Tanmay.
Thanks, Tanmay.
You're welcome.
And
Thanks,
then-
everyone.
And we'd like to especially thank Amrita. I don't know if she's on the call or not.
Yes, she infused so much energy in all of us. Exciting.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.